The Drinks Adventures podcast is proudly supported by our friends at Bintani, Australia's leading supplier of ingredients for the brewing and distilling industries. Bintani has all the ingredients you need and they have experts in all categories on the team, so they understand how ingredients work together like no other supplier. Bintani handpicks the best. I'm James Atkinson, and this is Drinks Adventures, the podcast where I speak to some of the world's most exciting producers of beer, wine and spirits and explore trends and issues in the drinks industry today. Welcome to the final episode of Season 3 of Drinks Adventures. A special thanks to Chris Lukianenko, aka The Beer Healer, for recently having me on his podcast, The Beer Healer Interviews. It was something of a new experience for me, having Chris ask the questions for a change. If you want a little more insight into my background and how Drinks Adventures was conceived, please head on over to the Beer Healer Interviews. I'll link to it in the show notes. Now, because this is the season finale, I'll have some important stuff to say later on in the show. So please do stay with me until the very end. Let's get into this episode, in which I'm speaking to one of Australia's leading brewers who has announced some exciting news. The Sydney suburb of Marrickville almost certainly has the highest concentration of breweries of any suburb in Australia. I'm happy to be corrected on that, if anyone has any information to the contrary. There's yet another brewery soon to join their ranks by the end of 2019, with the news that Philter Brewing is poised to set up shop just down the road from the original Batch Brewing facility. Co-founder Sam Fuss joined me for a chat about this momentous development for Philter, which has fast become one of Australia's larger independent beer brands without having a brewery of its own. And meanwhile, the company has picked up a slew of trophies for its flagship XPA. Sam and I chat about the Marrickville brewing scene and whether the emergence of so many breweries in one suburb is a good thing. But also, we find out a bit more about Sam's brewing career, which began at Little Creatures in 2000. There, Sam worked alongside Creatures' first ever brewer, Janice McDonald, who was one of the first guests on the Drinks Adventures podcast back in Season 1. You can hear my chat with Sam right after this message from another one of our valued sponsors. This episode of Drinks Adventures is proudly sponsored by Fever Tree Premium Mixers. Fever Tree pioneered the world's first premium tonic water, made only with naturally sourced ingredients, and today it's served in 9 out of 10 of the world's top restaurants. Fever Tree Tonic, because if 3/4 of your G&T is tonic, make sure you mix with the best. Sam Fuss, thanks so much for joining me on the Drinks Adventures podcast.
My pleasure, James. Good to be here.
When you launched Philter, was it always part of the plan to have your own brewery? Was that always on the cards from day dot?
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, in hindsight, I would not have put in the brew house and the equipment and what I'm putting in now if we had built it before. Because I guess it's kind of where we're at has kind of amazed all of us. Where we're at the stage we're at, we're only 2.5 years old, we would absolutely have outgrown what I would have potentially, or what we would have had an idea of putting in the first place. So it also allowed us to spend and use that money on our marketing, our branding, getting some awesome sales crew out there, some guns and stuff like that. Because I knew that I could really successfully brew beers out of another facility if I was there. So I spent a lot of time with, I used to drive up when we were brewing at a Hope Estate for a short while. I used to drive up there, I'd leave at 4 in the morning, I'd drive up there and I'd come back home back at 10 o'clock at night. I used to do that twice a week sometimes, just for packaging days and brewing days. So I still need to have that control. It's really important for me, and that, and I'm a Leo, so I just like control anyway. So, and now that I'm brewing down in Melbourne, like I said, I'm on the phone all day, emails constantly, and I fly in and out. I'll fly in, I'll spend maybe 5 hours, 6 hours, and I'll come back, I'll get home back at 8 o'clock at night. I'll just go do a day turnaround, or I hang out down there with Nick, who's she's our gun down there, and we might go and visit some customers or go and have an event or something like that on. So it's really good. It kind of keeps my foot in and around Melbourne as well. Get out and check out new beers and go to breweries that are creating different styles and beers and get in and around. Sydney and Melbourne are two different beasts. They really are.
So tell me about the process with finding the site. How many sites have you looked at, and what is it like out there now trying to find a site for a brewery in this area?
We've looked at a lot. And if I've not been able to, Mick or Steph have been out there looking at a few. And I think Marrickville recently, as you probably know, was rezoned. It changed where you could and can't have a commercial facility. But that's what I love about Marrickville too. And just the reason we wanted to be in Marrickville is all three of us, me, Mick and Steph, we live here. You know, the boys, their wives and kids, they work in the area. The kids go to school in Marrickville. It's our community. It's our place. It's our home. So that was really important, you know. Plus, no one wants to drive too far to work. So might as well jump on your bike and make it down the road. But that was really important for us to give back and be part of the community, because it's an amazing community around this area. So,
having said that though, it's also a pretty crowded market for breweries in the suburbs. So what was there not a part of you all that was thinking, why don't we be, you know, the brewery that goes slightly outside this area?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're looking at something like that, you've still got to be in a light industrial area. So if we're talking about that, then we've got a choice of Alexandria, Mascot.
Because of the scale of the brewery that you wanted to build.
Because of the size, yeah. So we weren't looking for a brew pub.
Yeah.
We were never going to be a brew pub.
Yeah.
We knew we wanted to make beer, good beer, and lots of it. That was important. So, we had a couple of things we needed to tick off the list kind of thing. So, floor space and size. We were looking between 800 and 1,000, ideally. Okay, has it got gas? Has it got electricity? And how much has it got? So a lot of the old buildings in around Marrickville only have 120, 150 amps. You can't run a commercial brewery on that. And
you can't retrofit that stuff?
You can chuck solar panels on, but that might run your computer or your lights or something like that. You really need to, because of the power required, you've got pumps running, you've got keg cleaners going, you've got canning lines, you've got a whole bunch of things that take up a pretty big load. So you can, there's some boosters and stuff you can put in and attach, and that'll give you a bit of a quick boost. But really, realistically, if you're looking at anything, you need to be 180 plus. 180 is on the small, the lower end of the scale. So 180 amps. Roof height, that's important. Fermenters are big. Where it is, where it's situated. Is it in a high flow area?
Because you obviously, even though you didn't want a brew pub, you did want to have a tap room.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. And that was really important for us too, because we wanted people to see us for who we are. We wanted them to come into our home. And we wanted to, people to kind of step inside who we are and step inside us as a family and us as Philter. So that was really important. And being able to showcase, being able to have beers on tap that are nowhere else. You've got to come to the brewery to get these kind of thing. That's fantastic. That's great. So that's important, where we were situated for sure. If we weren't going to do that, then we would have just gone out to, bumfuck nowhere and set up out there and had all the room at the great price and the great rent and all that and being given this, but that's not what we wanted. We wanted an identity. We wanted a home.
You've ended up in a site that's like right in, let's call it the Golden Triangle or something like that, or the...
it's awesome. It's getting weird, isn't it?
It's probably not a triangle, but actually, I've just come back from Portland, as you know, and it's getting a little bit more like Portland in Marrickville, in that you could kind of walk out and hit a brewery just about.
Yeah.
Was that a concern, or did you see it as being a positive that you've got Batch, you've got Stockade, you've got The Source, you've got Grifter, all within a stone's throw of you guys?
Yeah, that's great. Look, the fantastic thing is it's bringing people in. So you used to drive around this area before the breweries and Marrickville was dead, right? Now you drive around on a Saturday, Sunday and you've got groups of people walking here and they're going there. You've got families with kids and babies and prams and you know where they're going. They're not just walking on a weird street in Marrickville. They're going from brewery to brewery to brewery. So, and in amongst all of that, you've got your distilleries and then you've got your coffee roasters and then you've got your bread makers and, all that thing. So it's just, I'm really finding it, and I think we as brewers are just adding to it as well. It is a really beautiful, harmonious community of artisan producers. It's cool as well, It's a bit like the small bar scene when that kind of came out. And you walk up an alleyway in Sydney or Melbourne, mainly Melbourne because that's where it kicked off. And all of a sudden you've opened these doors and there's this fucking amazing bar and everyone's in there and everyone's having a great time. And you would have walked past it and not batted an eyelid if you didn't know it was there. So that's what I really like that vibe about it as well. You never know what's around the next corner.
Did you feel like when you spoke to the other brewers in the area and told them what you were doing and where you were doing it, that they were kind of welcoming to have you come to the area? Or were they like, oh, shit.
Oh, shit,
I mean, Batch have been like, they're under siege, aren't they? I feel like someone needs to come in from the back, you know what I mean?
Look, we are all good mates. We are good mates. We have an association called the Inner West Brewers Association, and we get together and raise funds, work with local council. We do a lot of things. So all of us brewers get together and work as one. So we all kind of know each other. The site that we've got, I think, is far enough away from everyone, but still on that triangle. It's just built in a spot that you might normally have a 2-can trip. Instead, it'll just be a 1-can trip in between breweries. I think it's important not to be on top of each other. But as we know, Marrickville is a huge suburb. I think it's one of the biggest suburbs in Sydney.
With so many other tap rooms already around the place, does that put pressure on you guys to really create a pretty awesome experience as to why people should come to Philter?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about this a lot. We want our place to be something different. We want people to open those doors and walk in and have that wow. We want people to be blown away. So with or without a kitchen, we'll get it open. Where we're having the hospitality side, we've got 2 levels, but we're going to do something amazing up on the top level, but I'm not going to give that away yet. But it's going to be something that you will not have seen in any brewery, I don't think.
It gets talked about a lot that Marrickville is like the epicentre of craft beer in Australia. Can you think of another suburb or another area or anywhere in Australia that would have the same concentration of breweries?
How many breweries have we got in Marrickville, including us when we open the doors? It must be up around 9 or 10. And look, I've heard on the grapevine that there's another brewery wanting another brewery or 2 looking in the area.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Do tell.
Because when you go around and you spend time with these, the real estate guys, and they're like, oh yeah, we had another brewery that wants to set up, look at this one last week as well. And you're like, oh, really, what's that one? And I've heard that a couple of times. I can maybe put a name to one of them, maybe 2 of them, but yeah, outside of recording. I don't want to get myself in trouble or let the cat out the bag too early.
Of course. Maybe go back for a minute. I don't know too much about your business partners, the co-founders of Philter. How do you know each other and what do the other guys bring to the table?
Mick and Steph, so Stefan and Mick Neal, Stefan Constantoulis and Mick Neal. Don't try and spell Steph's last name. Steph's background was Beam Suntory, ex-Lion as well, working in marketing and branding there. And Mick's background is the surf trade. So he was the MD for O'Neill, wetsuits, surf brand, for about 10, 12 years. So he's got a great business mind. So we all have these really, really lovely attributes that are key for the business. Obviously the managing of a business, marketing and branding, and obviously the brewing side of things. But what's really nice is we collaborate on a lot of those things. Maybe not so much mixed stuff, because that's just boring accounting business stuff. So, no.
Very important stuff.
The important stuff, yeah, exactly. But no, we do. When we're, I like to spitball some beers, and the boys like to come to me and say, hey, Sammy, what do you reckon about this? Steph always threatens he's going to get his grainfather out. He bought one, I think he's used it maybe once. So he always threatens that, he's going to get his grandfather out and teach me how to properly brew. I'm not really worried there. But so it's a really nice mesh of the 3 of us who we take care of the day-to-day running of the business.
You mentioned that you guys have been surprised by where you found yourselves after 2.5 years. Can you give me like a bit of an idea of what sort of volume Philter's doing these days?
I can't give you an exact idea.
I don't want exact. I just want how many zeros.
How many zeros?
And what's at the front?
This year, we, at the IBA's, Independent Brewers Awards and Association Awards, we went in as large brewery. So that's all based on how many, the litrage you produce per annum. So
you're somewhere between 300,000 and 1 million, let's say?
Yeah, I think what's the cutoff? Haven't cracked it. No, look, at the end of this, we'll probably be about 8.
How did you get into all this in the first place?
This crazy world of brewing.
Yeah.
So I was the third brewer ever employed at Little Creatures.
Was it hospitality that got you into Creatures in the first place?
Yes. Yeah, sorry. So I was doing hospitality, but I was also working over at Rottnest, working in the dive shop and hanging out there and working on boats and back into hospitality and, kind of just having a good time. And I went over to Europe and I came back and asked one of the boys who I had previously worked with, who was a manager there, got any jobs. And my dad had told me, who's a Freo, not born and bred, but he's a Freo boy. He said, they're building this brewery. Because he was actually doing some work for them as a blacksmith. So building some of their candelabras and some of their, forms they had in the old place. And he said, just check it out when you come back, Sam. So I went in there, got the job, started on the bar. I used to, whenever I had any spare time, whatever, I would go over and hang out in the brewery. So days off, after the shifts, I'd go and hang out with the boys because I was really interested. I studied under my father as a blacksmith as well. So I was really interested in working with my hands, and that's how I operate. That's how, I kind of, that's what energises me, is creating things. So, and they had an adopt a brewer program where, that you'd be able to, people on the bar and stuff would be able to go into the brewery for a day and, get to brew a pale ale and mush around all the hops and everything. I ended up doing 12 of those, and we were only supposed to do like one as a training. Janice did a bit of a staff training with us as well. And I just remember looking at Janice and, just kind of going, oh, wow, I'd love to be like you. This is cool. And she said to me, do you just like drinking? Is that why you're here a second time? And I'm like, can't remember what I said, but it definitely wasn't. Maybe a little bit because I like drinking, but it was because I was interested in what she was saying. I was fascinated about what it was, this whole brewing thing. But also, fortunately, in a pub that I'd worked in previously, I worked in the cellar, and that pub was attached to the Sail and Anchor chain. So I had all the craft beers from Sail and Anchor coming over. So I knew how to deal with craft beer from a keg perspective and a serving perspective. That was pretty unique back in that day because you didn't have that. There weren't any other breweries around apart from the Sail and Anchor that were producing craft beers, really. There were, but not many that were going into pubs and stuff. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time over in the brewery, just helping out, doing gravities, grading out, just hanging out. And then unfortunately, sorry, Aaron from Gage Roads, he was the first brewer employed there. He burnt his foot quite severely. So he ended up in hospital. He had to take 6 to 8 weeks off. So they said, Sam, would you like to come over to the brewery for 8 weeks and help us out over there because we really need some support? And I guess that was the beginning of the end. Really, yeah. So 8 weeks came, Aaron came back and production had kind of really come on. I obviously proved myself. Back then, grain bags were 50 kilos and I was pretty fit, but still 50 kilos is pretty big. So I had to be physically strong enough and smart enough to not hurt myself, but also be able to get the job done without the brute and the brawn of maybe a male physique that would be able to pick those 50 kilo bags up and take it straight over. So I might have been a little bit slower, but I got the job done. So he came back and they said, Sammy, would you like to join us in the brewery?
You mentioned the one challenge of being a female brewer. Has it been challenging in other respects over the course of your career?
This is a question I get asked a lot, and I don't know whether to feel guilty about it or not. Whilst I know there are so many women struggling in and around industries these days and feeling like they're not being respected and not being utilised to the best of their ability, I think because of my stubbornness and just my attitude to just get it done, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me, so I didn't let anything stop me. So it never got in my way. Once I joined Little Creatures, I was taken under the wing by some of the industry greats. Roger Bustle, who's Little Creatures Beer Rogers, and was named after, and some of the old boys really took me under their wing and they just guided me, and it was beautiful. It was really quite lovely. They were amazing guys, and I was very lucky to have that opportunity. And I think, to make it in an industry back then when there were no females, if they were in the lab or maybe at the maltings, I think you really had to have an attitude of somewhat arrogance, or not arrogance, I don't want to call it arrogance, but having that confidence to just do what I wanted to do and make it just kind of, I think other people saw that. So I didn't have anyone stand in my way. I don't felt like I was ever looked down upon because of my, being a female. So I find that really difficult when I speak to women these days, because I do know that is a challenge for so many women. So I guess when I talk to women about how, they ask me, what can I do? What was your experience like? Honestly, my experience was very different to what is happening now. I had a very positive experience. I had a really wonderful experience coming through brewing, but that was because of my confidence and my attitude. But it is important also to nurture the way other women coming through the industry, which is what I do, and what I've always done, is nurture and support and give little hints and tips, work smarter, not harder. Figure out a way to get that job done, but it's okay to ask someone to help lift. You don't need to bust your back, even the guys. You don't need to lift that by yourself. I'm right here, standing here. Why don't I give you a hand, and you might have a good back till you're, 85. So I think all round, everyone should be working a bit safer and a bit smarter. So it's about just giving some hints and tips and working with challenges around the possibility of other team members giving you a bit of shit. But, I find the only time I do get a bit of shit, and, I do get this now that I'm looking for equipment, I'm doing things, and I guess when people come into the brewery or they're emailing me and they see Sam, it can go either way kind of thing, and then they rock up and they see female Sam, they're like, so who's choosing this equipment? I'm like, me, I'm just here. And they're like, sometimes they come off a little bit like, so do you know what you're doing with that? And I'm like, yeah, mate, I've kind of been in this industry for 19 years and I could probably pull that apart and put it back together with my eyes closed. So I get a bit of that.
I bet you do not suffer that gladly.
No.
I would hate to be the rep that walks in the door and mansplains that to you.
Yeah, and it pisses me off. But then I don't let it piss me off. I just come back with some sarcastic comment and be done with it. I think giving the handshake, as soon as they walk in, I give a really nice firm handshake and they're like, ooh, oh shit. And I'm like, oh, that's a good handshake. Yeah, I throw kegs around for a living. So I think that's important to break that barrier down. I'm not someone that sits in the office and runs a brewery from the office. I'm very much hands-on, which, this week alone, we've moved 6 ton of rubble by hand between me and a couple of lads I've got working down there. I'm driving the truck out to the tip to get rid of all the rubble. I'm on the jackhammer. I'm on the tools building this brewery, which is awesome. I wouldn't have it any other way either, which is why you can hear me a bit nasally, because I've had probably about 2 bags of concrete up my nose over the last few days of jackhammering drains and stuff like that.
You've obviously worked at a few other places throughout your career. How important was it for you to be an owner of your own brand and control your own destiny like that?
Yeah, really important at this stage. I think it's really important as well to be able to go and work in different breweries and see how they operate and, do your apprenticeship, I guess, so to speak, do your apprenticeship elsewhere, but under the watch of creative, amazing people as well, learn, be a sponge, get all that in. So I knew after Young Henry's that whatever I did next, I needed skin in the game. I'd come to that point, I'm not getting any younger, and finding the right partners, finding the right people to work with, that's really important, because it can all go belly up. If you don't agree on certain things, you've seen that, I've seen that, so that's important.
Well, Sam, it's been a really fantastic chat, so thanks for joining me on the program, and congratulations on the new brewery.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, mate. Hopefully we'll have the doors open by Christmas. Fingers crossed. I'd love to have a beer with you when we get there.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
That was Sam Fuss from Philter Brewing. A reminder that you can support the Drinks Adventures podcast by purchasing your beautiful limited edition drink coasters online at drinksadventures.com.au. This is my alternative to asking you for a donation on Patreon. They're $39.95, which goes a long way to helping us finance production of this podcast, and you get something tangible in return. I've also kept a few sets aside to use as prizes for listeners who help us grow our audience by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or by sharing the podcast with your friends and followers. Simply take a screen grab of the episode in your podcast player and post it to Instagram, tagging my account, that's @byJamesAtkinson, or email a screen grab of your Facebook post plugging the show to hello@drinksadventures.com.au. In fact, I don't really give a tinker's cuss how you do it. Just show me how you've helped spread the word about the Drinks Adventures podcast, and I'll select the best entries to win some coasters. No matter if you've already bought yours, do your promo duties and you could win another set, one for the home and one for the office. Thank you to Andrew M. from Adelaide for the latest review. He says James's interview style, combined with his knowledge of the industry, makes this podcast not just educational and informative, but easy to listen to and thoroughly enjoyable. The calibre of guests is first class. If you have an interest in Australian beverages or would like to expand your knowledge of the industry, this is a one-stop shop. Andrew, make yourself known and we'll get you a set of the coasters. And a shout out to everyone else who has left reviews in recent weeks. David Howley, Beer Trooper, Barriosis, Vanderlake 14 and Hector, The Repair Shop. Legends, all of you. Thanks to everyone for tuning in during Season 3 and to Dave Robertson for the theme music and mixing. We've got a new season in production already, so we'll be with you again soon. See you then. The Drinks Adventures podcast is produced by me, James Atkinson, with additional production and mixing by Dave Robertson. You can find complete transcripts, links and other information on the show at drinksadventures.com.au. You can follow me on all social media platforms at @ByJamesAtkinson, like my Facebook page, James Atkinson Drinks Adventures, to be kept informed of podcast giveaways and other news about the show. The Drinks Adventures podcast needs your support as listeners. Please do us a favour and leave an honest review and rating for the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. We love hearing your feedback and it helps inform other people this is a show worth listening to. Or simply drop us a line at hello@drinksadventures.com.au.